All right, welcome everybody to our Sunday morning live stream. This is a live stream that we do every single Sunday at 8:45 Pacific Standard Time in the morning, a.m. And the format that we kind of go through is we go through some Genus Brewing news or some news elsewhere around the beer world. Then we go into a beer of the week, which today we're talking about Kvass. And then we go into two discussion topics, which today they are kind of tied in and also tied into our beer of the week. We're talking about techniques for using high protein grains, and we're going to talk about some unique grains that you probably haven't heard of or probably haven't used that are actually really fun to make unique styles. I am joined here today with Teddy from the Grain Shed. And why don't you talk a little bit about why the Grain Shed's so cool and what they do?
Yeah, so we at the Grain Shed have a really simple focus. We want to use 100% local grain for everything that we do, both on the beer side and on the bakery side. So we're actually a bakery as well, focusing on bread. So we source grains directly from farms for our baking. On the brewing side, one of my business partners is Joel from Link Malt. So he founded the malt house here in Spokane. So we are able to get all of our grains malted in the area from local farms. So we focus a lot on a lot of unique grains, Landrace grains, which we'll talk about a little bit later, but we have a very grain-focused business all the way through. So, yeah.
I took a bite. Could you guys hear how crispy that was? It was really tasty.
It's a nice croissant. Stone milled, wood-fired oven baked. It's delicious.
All right, let's see if I can get this down fast enough to continue talking. Yeah, that was really good. So speaking of local bakery and local beer, let's open up this guy and tell us the story behind the beer that you brought. Let's start with the Inland Northwest series you guys are doing.
You got it. Yeah, so we being grain focused, we also are just generally location focused. We really love the Inland Northwest. There's so much that the Inland Northwest has to offer beer, both on the hop side and on the grain side. I mean, the Palouse is one of the most productive hop or grain growing regions in the entire world. So we've kind of come to this idea of having an Inland Northwest beer series. So we wanted to have an Inland Northwest Lager, an Inland Northwest Pale, and an Inland Northwest IPA. And each of those recipes will rotate. So this is our first iteration of the Inland Northwest Pale, which is really based off of the theme of Vienna Lager. Because we have such fantastic malt around here, this is 100% Baroness Vienna malt. So it's like, I think it's 5.5 L. It's really, really nice, clean, toasty. It's got a really, really fantastic flavor to it. Yeah.
And when we talk about we talked before on the stream about how we have grains that we sell here that are grown like 50 miles away and malted like 3 miles away. This is the grains that we're talking about.
Yeah, so this is Baroness barley, grown by Joseph's Granary down in Colfax, Washington, which, like Peter said, it's like a 40-mile drive. It's really close, really, really cool. In good years when it's safe and functional, Bill at Joseph's Granary does what he calls Baroness Barley Harvest Day, which is essentially everybody, bunch of brewers, distillers go down there. It's harvesting fields all around you. There's food. There's, just a ton of beer. It's really, really neat. So this is just kind of a great representation of what Baroness tastes like. The Vienna malt is absolutely fantastic.
It's rich.
Very rich. And this has only a little bit of bittering hop. I just did a little bit of nugget, actually, just enough for like 22, 23 IBUs.
Just get them
really
in there.
Clean,
yeah.
Really simple. This was Harvest, Imperial Harvest yeast.
Oh, cool, yeah. The subtle fruitiness you get off of the Harvest, I always like. I think it kind of complements the malt and helps push forward the flavors that you're looking for.
Totally, yeah. You get a little bit of that, that dried fruit piece to it, a little bit of that raisiny deal. It's really nice, really clean, really simple. So this is the first iteration of our Inland Northwest Lager. We're gonna, change it up each time, try something different. So
I just realized that I forgot to. We had all this time. I forgot to change the title from last week.
Hey. Look at that. Well, we're just here to make it fun, right?
Yeah.
Keep everybody on their toes.
I'll get in a little bit when we can go into some other stuff. Before we jump too far ahead into some stuff that he can talk more about, a couple of Genus Brewing news topic things. We got a new Quake Hazy on. We used Loki, that's the Voss strain of Quake. That's tasting really good. We got a new seltzer video out, just kind of talking about how we did our Peach Bellini seltzer with the Olive Nation extracts. So check that out. Super cool. And we are about to release our how-to side-by-side seltzer video probably in a couple days. Genus Not Brewing hit 1,000 subscribers, so thank you everyone who has subscribed to Genus Not Brewing. all our fun content, all our beer-related challenges, brewing with strange ingredients. We're going to move all that to the second channel because it's just not doing what it should be doing on our first channel, and we think that's because we have a too diverse of an audience to really focus on, either education or kind of the fun, challenging stuff. So if you're interested in that stuff, go subscribe to the second channel, Genus Not Brewing. And that is it for our news. Did you learn the jingle?
No.
There's a jingle.
I forgot you texted me and told me to learn the jingle.
So here's how it goes. When we talk about the style breakdown, the jingle goes, beer of the week, bump, 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 beer of the week.
Okay. Beer of the week, bump, 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 beer of the week.
Perfect. All right, so let's practice it together. Let's do it all together, and then we'll go into it. Now it's time for our beer of the week, bump, 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 beer of the week. Boo! Nailed it. Boo. Cool. And today's style breakdown is Kvass. And why don't you give them a breakdown on Kvass while I go and change the title?
Yeah, you got it. So Kvass is kind of an old, it's a very old style originating in the areas of Russia as a way to use up old bread. So I have particular interest in Kvass just being a bakery also. Kvass was really designed as a way to make sure that zero waste was happening when you couldn't really afford to have waste back several hundred years ago in the Russian steppes. So Kvass is essentially just a way of mashing bread to be able to pull out sugars that you can then let spontaneously ferment, get a little bit of alcohol. It's not really super strong traditionally, but it's a little bit more potable than actual water. Or at least would be a little bit more potable than actual water, looking back several hundred years. So it's an interesting deal, really low ABV. It can be flavored with a lot of different things, and you can make Kvass in a couple of different ways. Sometimes you'll see beet Kvass and things like that for some alternative sugar sources. But traditionally it's made with bread. We'll talk a little bit more about what we do at the Grain Shed to make Kvass in our own little ways. But it's traditionally a non-hopped beverage as well. It really didn't have a lot of ties to beer until more recently, as breweries were like, hey, how could we start using some different aspects and different things to add different flavors there. So yeah, Kvass is a really, really cool thing because it does reduce waste. It makes sure that nothing goes wrong. And it's a neat one that you can try a lot of different things with fermentation and things like that. I mean, bread can get moldy and things like that, and mashing it can kind of add some different aspects to it. So
What's your favorite style of bread to use when you make Kvass?
Ooh, style of bread to make or style of bread to use when we make Kvass? Good question. We'll use everything. We make a 100% rye bread, so not like your normal deli rye with caraway seed and things like that, but like super, super dense German rye. Rye doesn't rise the same way that wheat breads will. So it has this really, really crazy rich flavor, and in Kvass, it is absolutely fantastic. It pairs super well. It's spicy, it's herbal, it's really, really nice. The cool part about Kvass and things like that also is that you can change the flavors on how you process leftover bread as well. So for us, when we brew Kvass, we'll use our leftover hunks of bread from making toast slices and sandwiches and things like that. But you can change those flavors very, very actively by doing things like roasting or just toasting bread. You can burn it to really get a lot of those like roast malt sort of flavors and things like that. You can do a lot of different pieces there. You kind of run into some things where you with certain breads, like kind of the antithesis of what you said, Peter, about what's our favorite. We do have things that we try to avoid, thinking like, you generally don't want too much fat going into a mash. So we try to avoid any of our enriched doughs, things with a lot of butter or egg or things like that. But we will use some. We don't produce a lot of enriched doughs, a lot of enriched breads. So most of it is just sourdough, like traditionally fermented sourdough breads. I do really love, we have a bread that we make with a fermented oat porridge as well that has fenugreek and coriander seed in it that has this really awesome like herbal maple kick from the fenugreek. That's a really fantastic bread to use in kvass as well. And in fact, I made a kvass somewhat recently to mimic that bread, and it turned out absolutely fantastically, and we'll talk about that as well.
Boom. Sounds delicious. Thanks, everyone, for waiting for me to get back. Thanks, Teddy, for holding it down.
You got it.
Yeah, so that should be, if we were to go back and then we were to re-upload or reset, we should be able to find, look at that. New,
right there.
New thing and everything. Ancient Landrace grains. We look really sexy. Boom.
Yeah, it's perfect.
Cool.
Fantastic.
All right, let's go on to our, so Teddy's kind of give you a breakdown on kvass and what all we use. Our malt of the week was just going to be bread, obviously, because there's a lot of different ways that you can incorporate bread into kvass. And did you already talk about how when we're talking about kvass, we're kind of going kvass-ish, right?
Kvass-ish, yeah. And I didn't quite talk about that yet but really, like, we still, when we make kvass, we do actually still use malt as a base. Just because, when you make traditional kvass, you kind of struggle to get above like 1% ABV.
Because you don't have a lot of the active enzymes that are working your way. So
yeah, and like there's sugars. Yeah, like you said, we want more because we want it a little bit more shelf stable, and it needs to be saleable. And not a lot of people want to spend $12 on a crowler for a 1.2% ABV beverage. So
sure, there's some people out there, but
there are some. But we wanted to move a little bit faster than that for sure.
Yeah, so the biggest thing when it comes to doing kvass-ish, which we're talking about, is just making sure that you have enzymes that are being active and actually breaking down the bread starches into some fermentable sugars, and then also using a base of malt that's going to help convert everything and also going to give you some more sugars to ferment. What's your favorite malt to use when you do your base for kvass? Depends on the bread, probably, right?
It depends on the bread, and it depends on, we kind of use our kvass, we call them the wasted loaf, which we think is real cute and real kitschy. But when we make our wasted loaves, we do a lot of different things. I kind of use it as an opportunity to make something like totally out there, something totally weird. So for me, my generally favorite malt base is actually like pretty close to 100% Pilsner base. I really like having something that, bread has that bready flavor anyways. It's having something a little bit lighter, a little bit grassier, kind of plays nicely with that flavor. Though we'll use pale, English pale, something like, hell, we've done things that are Munich based. So we'll use some 100% Munich bases as well if we're doing something a little bit darker. And then I'll generally roast or toast a little bit of bread too to get that little, that deeper, richer flavor to it. But most often, I think if I looked, it would be Pils.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Base. Yeah,
I could see a couple breads, maybe like a pumpernickel or like a dark rye or something like that.
Totally.
Standing up to some other malts, but I like that idea of Pilsner as the base.
Yeah, and when we use rye bread, I'll generally do a rye-based beer. And then, obviously with rye, it's a hulless grain, so we do need to have some barley in there as well. And generally I'll do, with rye, it's a little bit meatier anyways. I'll do a pale, sometimes an English pale as well. And then do the rest of the flavor based off of that as well, using some spicy things throughout.
Nice. So. Makes a lot of sense. Kent, hey, thank you so much for the super chat. We appreciate you supporting the channel. Always makes us feel good when people give us super chats. Makes us feel like you appreciate what we're doing. So thank you. Let's go on to so for hop of the week again. This is a really weird style of beer. It's one of those beers, kind of like when we're talking about braggots, where you can do hops, but it's not necessarily traditional. So let's talk about, instead of just hops, let's talk about different spices that you've seen that you've put in, kind of depending on the flavor profile of beer. I've seen things like mint, like things like raisins.
Yep. We'll use dried fruit in them fairly frequently. I mentioned briefly earlier that we did one based off of our fermented oat porridge bread, which is called the Otis, the name of the bread, and it's a fermented oat porridge that has fenugreek seed and coriander seed.
Yeah.
So the one that I did with that recently, I literally just took, I think it was 22 pounds of fermented oat porridge with the fenugreek and coriander and just dumped it straight in the bottom of the fermenter.
Nice.
And let that be a good portion of the yeast added to it. And it was, that was fantastic. That fenugreek coriander brings this like crazy strong maple flavor through. It's really fantastic, which I didn't really expect with the amount of coriander that we have in it, but that fenugreek just comes through really strong, tons of maple flavor. So that was really nice. Raisins have definitely used a fair few times. I also do like lemon verbena. We've done lemon verbena in a kvass before, and actually I think that we mixed that with pink peppercorn.
Okay, that makes sense.
It kind of made that that nice mix of flavor.
Yeah, you get the bright, like almost medicinal herbalness from the lemon verbena,
Yes.
and then the pink peppercorn to kind of give you some spiciness on top of that.
Yeah, and we'll generally use that when we do like a blend of breads, which is often what we'll do. We sometimes will do single type breads, but often it's mixed blend just based off of like whatever we've been using for sandwiches, slices, things like that at the shop.
Yeah.
And so that's generally a pretty nice base, so we can do a lot of different things on top of that.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So you talked about with the fermented oat porridge, using that as your yeast. I put the yeast of the week as a sourdough starter, but I think pretty much any started yeast based on what you're kind of doing will work pretty well, right? What have you gotten from different? So you've talked about the fermented oat porridge. How about from sourdough starter? What do you get when you use that?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So we wanted to try. We did a beer quite a while ago where we did a small portion of a sourdough starter. It's really nice. Turned out really good. We also pitched traditional saison with it as well, which was a good flavor pairing, honestly. But it worked really well. So I wanted to try 100% sourdough starter. So we did. I think it was a full batch of Levain for us, which is normally it's about 11 pounds of Coruscant or a Kamut based as far as the flour goes within our house culture for sourdough.
Right.
And fermented, that was the only yeast that we pitched for it, and it was incredible. It was actually, when it fermented, it blew the top off of our barrel and a half fermenter.
Yeah.
It like oozed this, it like crystallized all of the krausen that came out. Like it crystallized. It almost looked like meringue.
Huh.
Really strange. But the overall beer, it took a long time to clarify. It was really muddy for quite a while, so it probably sat for 2 months before it was really ready to transfer and bride up and then carbon keg. But it ended up having. I'm not a huge traditional Bavarian like Weizen yeast person, but it had a lot of those similar flavors in the best way possible. It kind of had that nice like fruity clovey piece,
right?
Strangely, without it being overwhelming and off-putting, it was really clean, and it was kind of a mix of that like Bavarian Hefeweizen flavor and saison.
Yeah,
honestly, it was really awesome. It had a really wonderful flavor.
So I don't know who's gonna remember this. Maybe some of the older fans that have been watching our live streams for a while, but Logan and I actually tried that on a live stream, like one of our earlier live streams that we did. Right after it came out, and we were like, wow, and it reminded me of Dogfish Head a long time ago did an ancient series, and they used, I forget what they call it, I just remember dome being in the name, because they used dome fruit and some stuff from Egypt, basically.
Yes.
But it reminded me a lot of that, where it had that kind of subtle fruitiness like a Bavarian yeast would, a little bit of clove, but without the clove being off-putting, and just being kind of this like smooth, sessionable, almost milky kind of feel.
It worked surprisingly well too. That was another Kvass, so it was a good portion of bread. Generally, when I brew a Kvass, it's on our small system, so it's a barrel and a half, and I'll generally try to do about 30 to 50 pounds of bread in the mash.
Yeah.
And this had that as well, and it ended up at like an OG of about 1054. With just the sourdough starter, it fermented down to 998.
Wow.
It was insanely dry, but it didn't feel super dry.
Yeah,
it didn't feel champagne-y. It didn't feel really crazy dry. Had a nice sweetness to it. It was really fantastic. But yeah, it ended up being like 7.2% really unexpectedly, because that sourdough starter fermented down so far.
I'm surprised that it wasn't that it took so long to clarify down that low.
Yeah, it was I mean, definitely the most interesting fermentation that we've come across.
And that's what's fun. I love being able to experiment with things like sourdough starter where you don't necessarily know what you're going to get, but whatever happens, it's going to be fun. Fun to see it regardless.
Yeah, absolutely.
Let's jump into techniques for some high-protein grains. That's going to be our topic number 1 of the week. I'm going to skip. We usually do some water chem ideas when it comes to the beer of the week, but I feel like with the Kvass, it's kind of like really, really dependent on a lot of things. And so in general, I'd probably think something that's more minerally, just as an idea. But there's not really a good consistent water profile for Kvass, I don't think.
No, and it's hard too, because with sourdough breads, which is what we bake and then use for
salt
Kvass,
in there already. Yeah.
There's salt in there, and it's generally acidic. So it's hard to do any acid treatments too. Honestly, I can't say that I've been super great with testing my pH on our Kvasses, but next time I brew it, I will, just to see like generally what my pH is.
How it changes.
But I haven't really ever acidulated my mashes.
Yeah.
For Kvass, so.
The Apartment Brewer, thank you so much for the super chat. Really appreciate the info on sourdough starter fermentation. I've looked into that before, and there's just not much info out there on that. So if I see you do a video on sourdough starter, I'll be really happy. You should really do. I love seeing people who play with some stuff, especially that are doing YouTube videos. The Apartment Brewer is another person that puts out a lot of content on this stuff. And I love seeing when people play with fermentations and things that are not as set in stone. There's a lot of people that want to just kind of be like, I know how to brew this beer, so that's what I'm going to put on YouTube. And I think it's way more fun when people are like, I don't know how to brew this style of beer, but I'm going to play with it and see what happens. Also, USMC Mike 1. Enjoy the weekly show. Thank you so much for the super chat. We really appreciate that. All right, let's jump into techniques for high protein grains, but let's jump into, before we do that, what's next?
Ooh. You know, I think that we should go to a Landrace because we're about to talk about high protein grains.
Yep.
Let's do, I think Purple Egyptian is going to be a good one.
Perfect.
Yeah.
I'm excited for that.
Should I give an intro on what Purple Egyptian is?
Yeah, do it.
Okay. So we'll talk a little bit more about unique grains a little bit later, but Peter's grabbing a beer that we make with Purple Egyptian barley. So Purple Egyptian barley is an African variety of black barley. Actually grows black, purple-ish black in the field. It's really fantastic. Grown by a good friend of ours and actually one of our co-owners at the grain shed named John Sherman. His farm down in the Palouse called Palouse Heritage. Really, really fantastic farm. They grow some of the most unique grains that you could ever find. So Purple Egyptian has this really beautiful dried fruit, dried apricot flavor. It is a self-threshing grain, which means that it's essentially hulless. There's a decent amount of hull material in there, but we treat it as though it's hulless. So we do cut it with another barley that is hulled, which is called Scots Bear barley. So as we pour this is a little bit low carb, which is actually intentional, which kind of drives people a little bit nuts. But it is a really, actually it's looking pretty good today, but it's this really beautiful flavor to it. And I actually find a slightly lower carb fits it well. It kind of helps
that English style push forward.
Yeah, and you know, we get a fair few Untapped things where people are irritated that it's low carb.
Untapped, the king of everything you should follow when it comes to deciding what beer is good.
The Yelp of beer, right?
How was that? Was that good? Oh, that's really good. I like that. That's got like a subtle acidity to it as well. It's got like a bright, almost floral kind of quality that comes from the malt, which is really fun.
Yeah,
really, that's enjoyable.
That little bit of like, it's always to me come across as dried apricot.
Yeah,
it's like, and it's really subtle. It's very grape nutty too. Like brewing with Purple Egyptian, it literally smells like grape nuts. And tastes like grape nuts. It's fantastic. It's one of our very favorite grains and beers. Really nice, really clean.
Absolutely. All right, so let's go into some techniques for high protein grains because Purple Egyptian is a high protein grain, and you already mentioned that it's hulless.
Yep.
Which might, I'm just going to jump down to one of the things that I have here with high protein grains in general is using rice hulls.
Yeah.
Or using a really husky grain.
Yep.
I know sometimes I think it was Triticale I had a while ago that was really husky. And then a lot of oat malts that I bring in will be like, they'll have extra husk on them too. So using something that's got that little extra bit to fluff up the grain bed can be a really good, a really good thing to have.
Yeah. So for this, we did, like I said, this is with Purple Egyptian being hulless. We did cut it with a hulled-on barley. So another Landrace grain that we'll talk about in a little bit. Scots Bear, which has this crazy heritage, but it's a really Scots Bear is a really, really small barley, and as a result, like there's a lot of husk matter per pound in it, just because the kernels themselves are pretty small. So this is actually it's 60% Purple Egyptian, 40% Scots Bear, to be able to create that amount of filtration.
Gotcha.
And we've generally had really great success. No stuck mash, nothing like that.
Perfect.
It's been pretty nice.
Yeah, and the one thing that you want to, with any high protein grain, not just when huskless ones, anything that you're worrying about basically is how that sparge water is going to be filtering through the grain bed, and so anything that you can use to fluff up the mash is just going to make it sure that the water can rinse more evenly through the grain bed, is what we're talking about. And so using rice hulls or using a husky barley, or even just a small. Lot of husk to small grain matter barley is a good way to do it.
Yeah.
Let's go into, so do you guys do step mashing when you do a lot of the high protein stuff?
We don't, but that's more not because we don't want to. That's more based off of the equipment that we have. So for these, we're brewing 10-barrel batches, and we have we don't have a mash tun with adjustable heat. We could do it with multiple water additions for sure, but we've generally just done single infusion mashing for this, which as a result we do end up having fairly low extract. These Landrace grains are kind of tricky with that anyways, and they are high protein. This Purple Egyptian's just under 16%, I believe, or hovering just around 16%, which actually, even with that, still pretty nice and clear. And in fact, the majority of what you see in there is actually, I think, just yeast.
Yeah.
So it's nice and clear, even with having insanely high protein. We actually think that protein adds flavor.
Yeah, for sure.
Which is what we really love.
That's what I tell people about Pilsner malts.
Yeah.
That's why you use Pilsner malts.
Yeah. Absolutely, they're strong. They're still So these really nice high protein things. Step mashing, I would like to be able to do. I would like to be able to get a little bit more of that breakdown and more enzyme activation and things like that from it. But what generally I've done is just single infusion aiming. I try to aim, because these are meant to be a little bit stronger, richer. I aim for like 154 degrees, roughly, on that. So. It is something that we've brewed with Purple Egyptian now for several years, and I mean, even I'll be rebrewing this in a couple of months, and it's still, I'm changing my process every single time because it is they're challenging to use when they're that high protein, and the amount. We see so much loss, like protein loss in a mash with these.
It absorbs a lot of liquid at the end.
Oh, it absorbs so much liquid. Like, with a more commodity grain, what you'd expect, like a pound or a gallon per 10, or I don't even remember what the amount is. It's about 1.5 times the absorption of what you would normally see.
Which on a 10-barrel batch, that's the difference between losing a half barrel and losing almost 2 kegs.
Oh yeah, it's wild. And I mean, we see as much trub doing this, which has less than 3 pounds total hops in a 10-barrel batch.
Yeah.
As we do seeing something that I have 15 pounds of hops going in on an IPA in a 10-barrel batch. Like we have that much trub, protein loss in the bottom of that or in that boil kettle. It's wild.
Crazy. So I've talked with Logan about this quite a bit before, and I want to do, because he failed at doing 100% Purple Egyptian barley because he just single infusion mashed it. And but I think I can do 100% Purple Egyptian. I'd love to get that flavor, but I think it would involve doing some sort of a step mash and probably even some sort of either a decoction or a ramped mash.
Yeah.
Where you actually boil the grains to help break down the proteins on the grains.
I mean, kind of like they do with, and I know turbid mash is on here, right? But like, it is. They need to be treated differently. Yeah. And I would love to do 100% purple.
Yeah.
But you really do have to be able to do some different techniques for it, and having like a less sophisticated mash tun makes it a little bit more challenging.
Yes.
Particularly on a 10-barrel, we don't have a...
Yeah, if you have a less sophisticated mash tun on like a 5-gallon scale, it's pretty easy to
totally. You can scoop that thing out with a pot. We don't have a slurry pump and a separate kettle that we can do everything with. So we're kind of limited on that. But 100% purple. If you guys do that, let me know. I would love to be there.
That'd be awesome.
It's the most unique barley that you can find. And the flavor on it is just exceptional. So but you're right. Like, it's got to be stepped some way and broken down a little bit more. And
I like the idea of the mechanical breakdown. Like, actually boil on so I like the idea of either decoction or doing it all, like the entire grain all the way up to a boil.
Totally.
That's probably the way that I'd want to do it. But it's gonna be a long brew day.
Yeah.
We have a similar kind of system down at the steel barrel on the 7-barrel where we don't have a complicated mash tun. It's just a basic vessel. And so when I have to do a step mash, I have to draw out the liquid and go into the boil kettle, heat it up in the boil kettle, and then put it back into the mash tun.
Yeah.
And that adds 2 to 3 hours to the brew day.
Totally. Yeah, well, and for like we could do it with some water infusions, but where we are, so we are in an alternating proprietorship at another brewery in town called Bellwether. We recently, actually about a year ago, but we're still figuring out. We got on-demand hot water.
Yeah.
Which is fantastic. Highly recommended. But I mean, and then we just recently finally got the grist hydrator fixed there. So now we have grist hydration. And so we're still just, I mean, I think that we've relearned how to brew on that system like 4 or 5 times since we got started there about a year and a half ago. And which is great. It's fun. It's really enjoyable. But it, being able to refine some of those process pieces of doing a step mash or, several water infusions to bring different temperatures has been tricky.
Yeah. While people might be thinking this, that are out there, do you know if there's a way to buy any of these Landrace grains that we're going to talk about on topic 2 online?
Say it again. I'm so sorry.
Is there a way to buy any of these grains that we're talking about?
I know that Link. So all of these grains that I'm talking about, Purple Egyptian barley, Scots Bear barley. Are malted by Link Malt in Spokane, and I believe that they do have online sales at a homebrew size from their website. So Link Malt, LINC Malt, stands for Local Inland Northwest Cooperative. You can get those things here. Do you guys sell any of these?
We sell them. Yeah. We pretty much sell the entire gamut of what they offer. But a lot of people watching are, we had one this morning that said "Good morning" from Pennsylvania, and
sweet.
There's people from Australia, which you're probably out of luck there. But
that one might be tricky internationally. Who knows? Honestly, I believe that they have them online for homebrew size. If not, I would highly recommend just reaching out to them directly. They're all fantastic people there, and they really want to spread the word on what they do because they don't malt standard malting varieties, at least as much. They did 1 batch of Copeland or 2 batches of Copeland once, which is like the traditional Amba variety of barley that you'll get from a lot of places. Other than that, it's all unique varieties of barley, whether they're high efficiency or low efficiency like these Landrace grains. But honestly, from my opinion, pound for pound, you're not going to find anything more flavorful than these Landrace grains, which are low efficiency, but the flavor on them is just insane.
Yeah.
So
it's about building flavor. That's why you use a lot of these Landrace grains. All right, so let's talk about. We've kind of talked about decoction and mash ramping. I'm not going to go into that because we've talked about that on the channel a lot before. But those are good techniques to use for high protein malts. Diminished mashing I threw in there just because it's traditional for a kvass. What that means is you get your mash temperature in relatively high, and then you basically throw it in an oven and let it naturally cool down. So that's a diminished mashing, and the reason that that's not usually used in the brewing world is because that's really bad for enzyme production. But I threw it in there because it's traditional for a kvass. Enzymes. Do you use a lot of enzymes, or have you used enzymes when it comes to mashing?
No, I have literally never used enzymes. We kind of follow the purity thing as much as we can.
Yeah.
Nothing against enzymes at all, but particularly for these beers, I'm not brewing these beers to be high alcohol. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like I'm brewing them to show highlight what these flavors are, what these grains are, and show how unique they are. And so I really when we first started, we were on like a 10-gallon Sabco. Yeah. It was the original
behind the bar.
Yeah, behind the bar, heating that place up like crazy. And we struggled to get anything above 4.5% with these little guys, with the Purple Egyptians, the Scots Bears, the Red Russians, whatever. And over time, we've been able to get that a little bit better, just refine of practice. And the biggest thing that we've found with these is you got to mill them like crazy.
Yeah,
they are. Landrace grains, I guess, is an important thing to talk about really quickly with these. They are high protein and they're right, but these are counted as Landrace grains, which essentially means that they are naturally occurring, naturally developing grains. So they weren't hybridized, they weren't bred in a lab or somewhere. Purple Egyptian was a naturally occurring grain in, actually not Egypt, but in Ethiopia. Scots Bear barley is the oldest cereal grain in the British Isles, in the Orkney Islands is where it's traditionally grown. And then our farmer Don grows it down on the Palouse, same with the Purple Egyptian. They are naturally occurring, and then they develop mechanisms based off of where they're grown. So they're grown here down between St. John and Endicott, Washington, in the Palouse. And that has its own unique climate, very unique climate, unique soil. So it develops unique defense mechanisms, flavors, things like that for what the traditional things that grain will struggle with in our area. It's dry land, so it means that we don't get a lot of moisture, which actually builds that protein. It builds flavor. But it's generally a smaller grain. There's not a lot of that sugary, starchy endosperm, but there's a lot of bran, which is where all that mineral content and all of those things stay, which is great, and the germ. So with these being landrace grains, they function differently, and they have different things that are going for them. Which is really unique, and so we generally haven't wanted to put any enzymes or anything in that. We want them to function.
You don't want to break down the proteins because you want to show off, because the proteins do build a lot of flavor in them.
Yeah,
that makes sense. So I talked about a little bit. We talked a little bit about turbid mashing. Turbid mashing is a technique for basically taking off the pre-broken down starchy bits, boiling those up, and continually adding those back in as like a step, or actually putting those off to the side for a boil, and then doing basically a step mash with new water infusions and kind of a turbid mashing. Which that technically, I guess, that would be possible in the bellwether system.
Yeah, that probably would be, and I mean that's this is not my style, but that's like a big lambic style.
It's traditionally done for
right?
for lambics.
And
to give a lot of the dextrins for the long term, aging and everything.
Because I mean, they'll use a lot of unmalted things, and so being able to pull a lot of those starches would work really well for these, where you do have a lot of starch content. And then just a lot of proteins that they do need to be broken down, because it ends up. I mean, you have so much loss and so much just insoluble proteins that come out of it. And I mean, when we're looking at these things that are like purple Egyptian being about 16% protein, what traditional malted barley, like brewery barley, is 9 to 10%?
I think it's lower than that. I know that the Lion's barley that Joel's been using, that was bred to be like 5, really, really low.
It's crazy low protein. So I mean, we're looking at these grains being like 2 to 3 times higher protein than what you would see like traditional Copeland Harrington blend barley. Like, it's wild. They're really, really high protein, which is challenging to use. It ends up making some different.
Not recommended in standard brewing practices. However, I think sometimes when I'm doing high protein grist and stuff like that, I don't. The reason it's not recommended is because there's a lot of beta glucans and certain things that are susceptible to oxidation, supposedly, that can get into your boil kettle. This day and age, they're usually not pre-oxidized. They're usually pretty healthy, shelf-stable grains, and so stirring isn't as big of an issue. But stirring a lot during the mash, both to increase efficiency and break up those protein structures that might be reducing your sparge, and then also just to get some of that into the boil kettle.
Yeah, so it's really interesting. Purple Egyptian, so black barleys generally, there are other varieties of black barleys. Black barleys traditionally arose in 2 locations, and it was the Nile River Valley, Ethiopia, that area, and then actually the Himalayas. The Himalayas generally are a less flavorful black barley, but they are generally food barleys. They're generally eating barleys, and they have insanely high beta glucans. I don't know the numbers on it, but it's super high, which is actually really heart healthy. So if you want a heart healthy beer, brew with Purple Egyptian. It's really great for you. But it totally causes problems. It can, beta glucans and things like that can be challenging. We do stir a lot, particularly as we're mashing in. We try to break up as much as possible. And we're talking about Purple Egyptian right now, but another one that we'll probably want to drink next is Red Russian, which is a wheat. And it's actually not Russian at all. It's an English wheat, but it got its name because the Russian Germans in the Palouse in Washington, it was their favorite their favorite growing wheat, like the 1880s, 90s, 1900s. It has because it's a wheat, it has its proteins are a lot more glutinous. And the first time we brewed with it, and even to this day, that gluten in there is so strong that we physically have to tear it off of fittings in our mash kettles. And there are our mash tuns and brew kettles and things like that. It is so strong and viscous. The first time we did it, we got what we thought was a stuck mash. It actually wasn't. It was just that there was so much really, really strongly balled protein stuck in the bottom tube of our mash tun from the Red Russian itself, because it itself, like the protein in it is just so wild.
Crazy.
Yeah, it's really, really interesting. But we do stir an awful lot. And like I said, milling is the biggest thing that we have found to impact it. We have to fine mill these things like crazy. And then generally have to fairly slowly lauter it.
Yeah.
To make
you guys also have, do you guys have your own mill for, you guys have to have your own mill for like making, because you make your own flour out of these stuff too.
We do, yeah. So we mill for baking on a big stone mill from a company in I think Vermont called New American Stone Mills. And we actually haven't really tried milling on that for brewing, with the exception that I did once for a raw grain that we were using.
Okay.
And I overmilled it and then had flour in the mash, which was a nightmare. But that is something that I have wanted to try with wheats and things like that, where we're not dealing with a husk going through that mill. But that is, I mean, we, on our general roller mill at the brewery, we crank that thing down for these Landrace grains because they're small.
Yeah.
They're little guys. They're not meant to be big and plump. That's not why they weren't bred. They are naturally occurring things with defense mechanisms. They're not agrochemical dependent, things like that. So we have to mill them like super fine.
And I would also imagine that higher protein makes their fracture a little bit less consistent.
Oh, like crazy. I mean, Scots Bear, the hulled barley that we use for all of these things, the hull doesn't want to let go of the starchy portions of the seed. It's aggravating is what it is. But yeah, it's super inconsistent because of that high protein.
Luckily, we just got a new mill. If you guys haven't seen the video, because we got a new mill, you guys know the mill? Comment below what your favorite mill is. Frazzle Penguin, you guys rock, period. That is all, end of line. Thanks, Frazzle Penguin. I miss your jokes. I might have missed some in this if you already said some, but I miss your jokes. Let's go on to... That was it. That was it for techniques for high protein grains. All right, unique grains to build flavor. We already talked about some of these, but let's kind of go over some other ones, and I guess we just talked about Red Russian wheat. Let's talk about that because we're going to get Red Russian wheat beer. Nailed it.
There you go.
Using words.
Yeah, so Red Russian is this really, really fantastic wheat that's really unique. It's, like I said, it's not actually Russian, but it was the favorite wheat for Russian German farmers in the Palouse to grow about 140 years ago. Its more traditional name is English Squarehead, and it grows to be the size of corn. When you standing in a field of it, it grows to be like 6 feet tall. For reference, if you're driving through the Palouse, wheat is very, very, very commonly grown. It's like 95% of the grain that's grown in the Palouse. Just standard commodity wheat, which is so uninteresting that it's just called commodity wheat or modern wheat. But it grows to be at about max 18 inches tall. Red Russian grows to be about 6 feet tall. So walking through a field of it, it literally looks like you're walking through a field of corn. It's really fantastic. And its flavor profile is what we love for it the most. It's got this really, really beautiful, slightly herbal flavor to it. Overall just really, really delightful. This actually has a small amount of flavor hops in it. It's really, really pretty. We have this whirlpooled, just flame out Cascade. So
it's got that nice, that floralness from the Cascade is like, I feel like it's what I want on top of the malt profile that's already there. It's really good.
Yeah, and the malt itself, the Red Russian, it's just crazy herbal. It's really, the first time we brewed with it, and we haven't had it quite the same since, it had this really interesting, strong coriander flavor to it. And you get a little bit of that like underlying citrus and
almost
just,
peppery spice.
Yeah. It's really, really nice. It's one of the favorites. Like it's just such a nice, clean, simple beer. And even though, it's a wheat beer, we with both the purple and the Red Russian, we just use Imperial's Pub.
Yeah.
We don't use anything super wild. We wanted something that's fairly
my favorite strain of yeast.
Yep. And so it's clean. It's really simple, nice and flavorful.
Yeah, I love this. And Pub, talking about the clarity here, Pub is a high flocculating yeast, which is really good at grabbing some stuff and pulling it down. It can be a finicky yeast, but if you use it right, the flavor profile that it gives is just very malt leaning, but also taking a huge back step. It's not going to be like creating a lot of fruity esters that get in the way. It just pushes forward that malt flavor in a really nice way.
Yeah, we love it. And that's what we use for all of our generally malt-based things is Pub.
Let's talk about Scott's Bear because we've already mentioned that, and that's got a really cool history on it.
Yeah, absolutely. So actually, it's the second half of this beer as well. So Purple Egyptian, being hullless, needed a hulled barley, so we use Scott's Bear. Red Russian, being a wheat, it is also hullless. We needed a barley with hulls on it, so we use Scott's Bear barley, which is, has this really awesome heritage to it. So it is the oldest growing cereal grain in the British Isles. So it originates in the Orkney Islands off of Scotland, so northeastern Scotland, and is grown in 2 places in the world. The Orkney Islands, where they've got about 40 acres of it still in cultivation. It wins like these crazy heritage awards every year. It's generally only used there for distilling. It's really, really, really crazy rich. Crazy strong. Like think about the strongest flavored barley that you've ever brewed with and multiply it by 10. It's really rich, super, super bready, super strong, really delicious. And we actually do brew with it 100%. I've been working on finalizing the recipe that we'll have to be able to put into a can that actually I think is just going to be like an English lager.
Yeah.
Just a little bit of Fuggles, 100% Scott's Bear Pale. But yeah, its history
Sounds
coming
really good.
from the Orkney Islands. It was actually grown out by George Washington.
Oh, nice.
So our farmer, Don, at Palouse Heritage, they actually, I think that they still have it. They curate a little test show plot at Mount Vernon in Virginia, which is George Washington's home. Because it has such a heritage. It was grown out fairly commonly in the Americas during colonial times and then just disappeared. It is a tiny barley, and from what I hear, not being a farmer, it's a giant pain to grow. It's not easy to grow. It's really low yielding. Brewing with it is kind of challenging because it is so small. When we brew with it 100%, the most I've gotten off of it, we struggle to get much above like 4.8%.
Oh, wow.
It's really low.
Yeah.
But the flavor is so rich, so strong, it's well worth it for us to use. And it's actually, it might be pushing 17% protein.
Oh, wow.
It's really high.
For a barley, that's especially. Yeah.
It's insane. Red Russian, the wheat itself is like 16.5%. They're all pretty dang high. And, the nice part for us that we've found and we're totally good with, a lot of breweries aim for consistency.
Yeah.
You get your flagship beer and you just like brew that over and over and over again. And, consistency in like quality is always important. For us, these grains, because they are the Landrace grains, they change annually. They change with climate.
Yeah.
They're agricultural products. So, when we have a really hot, dry summer, it changes. We have higher proteins, lower endosperm development, things like that from our farms, but we end up with more flavor. Wetter summers and things like that, it's the other way. We'll get a little bit more sugars, a little bit more endosperm, a little bit lower proteins, things like that, and we end up with a little bit less flavor, but it's a little bit easier to brew with, which has its trade-offs. For this, we really love Scott's Bear. Its history is insane. It's got a really great story that's super easy to tell, and the flavor on it is just fantastic.
Yeah, it's really good. Yep. Not that I'm drinking right now. We're still drinking the Red Russian wheat, but I've used Scott's Bear a number of times, and it's really, really good. Talking about, I love the concept that we talk about when we talk about making beers that are designed to be different based on the ingredients that you use. We have a philosophy here where we don't make the same beer twice, and we do that on purpose. Yeah. And I feel like, especially for a lot of medium to small scale breweries, I would say even 10 barrel and under, a lot of them physically can't make the same beer twice. And so a lot of breweries that you go to that are your favorite breweries that have that flagship that you go for every single time, it's probably going to change batch to batch. It's probably going to change the first keg that's on tap versus the last keg that's on tap. It's just not the same flavor every single time. The people that are in the business of making consistent flavors also usually make the lowest flavor in their beer.
Yeah.
So
Totally.
I like the idea, and I want to push that out there to a lot of people of when you're home brewing, use ingredients that might not be as consistent, but you're doing it to try to push different flavors and build bigger, newer flavors.
I love the way that you put that. Like, that's so, I mean, that articulates everything that we've ever thought. You know what I mean? Like, we totally brew the Purple Egyptian, but like, I change it almost every single time it's a weird grain to use. So we have to adjust. We have to figure out the best ways to use it.
My camera's battery's low.
Uh-oh. Are we good?
We might be. We'll see.
I'll let you handle that. This is beyond my skill set here. But yeah, we aren't super concerned with consistency. We want things that taste good and are unique. So that's really what we push, is making sure that we can do that well. As far as, the part of what we talked about with our Inland Northwest series, we're not doing the same beer. We cut off. Can they still hear us?
They still hear us.
Oh, good. Okay, cool.
The audio's good.
Perfect. Well, good. Glad that you guys can still hear us. So we really don't. We want everything to be different every single time. We want it to be unique. We want it to be something that is delicious, even if it's different. We also generally, with these beers, the Landrace beers specifically, they don't fit a style. If we were to try to put these forward for competitions and beer shows and things like that, I have no idea what style we would even put them under. They don't fit. They're not a pale ale. They're not anything that is known. We just aim for something that is good. Something that is unique, something that is flavorful, and that showcases our region. That's the big thing for us. We're really proud of what the Palouse and the Yakima Valley have to offer, and that's what our focus is. We want it to be something that kind of showcases those deals. We've kind of talked about it as like the winification of beer, which sounds real douchey, but it is something that we want it to be, where people can. With wine, you talk about variety. You talk about what those different grains are and what their flavors are, and that's what we want. We want something that really just highlights all of those different pieces for it. So that's why we use these weird Landrace grains and different things, not because they're easy to use, but because it's unique, it's flavorful, it has a story. The nice part about these grains too, that's really important to note, is that our farmer Don that grows them regeneratively. So he's actually quantified it down, where it's each pint that you drink of one of these beers is, I think it's like 5.2 square feet that is transitioned to regenerative agriculture, that is soil healthy, environmentally healthy, human healthy, things like that, which is pretty cool. Oh, that's okay. I mean, it's a good look for me. I'm pale enough as it is, so this maybe helps.
Sorry about us being purple. Hopefully that's not too off-putting. Hey, but while I was fixing the camera, we gained like 9 people watching. So
it's a good deal.
Whoops, guys. You got enough of our face. You can see our purple face now. All right. You just talked about. What did you just talk about?
I don't even know, man. Scots Bear and Landraces in general. I guess I didn't mention the other Landrace. But you gotta do a shout real quick.
Oh yeah, John, thank you so much for the super chat. He says, "Thank you for what you do. I really appreciate your work, humor, and style." Thank you. I appreciate the super chat. That's awesome, and we always love the support from you guys. Thank you so much. You want to jump into talking about the Khorasan?
Yeah. So one of the things that we brewed with, and actually it was when we did, I think it was the oat porridge kvass, which we called the otis. A big portion of the grain that we use for that bread is Khorasan, sometimes known as kamut. Kamut is its trade name, but really the underlying grain is Khorasan, which is this really, really, really ancient grain. It's a yellow wheat. It's gigantic. It's one of the parents of durum semolina, which is the pasta flour, or the pasta grain. So it's got this really cool deal to it. So we wanted to, when I brewed that beer, I wanted it to essentially showcase what the flavor of that bread was. I wanted to recreate that bread in a beer. So I used a bunch of raw Khorasan in it, and we actually milled it on our stone mill at the shop.
Should make some flour.
Which was a nightmare because then I immediately dumped in 20 pounds of flour into a mash, which was the stupidest thing I've done. Well, I shouldn't say the stupidest. We did.
You can always get stupider.
Totally. Yeah, I mean, I could do a lot more, but it was we milled it fairly coarsely, so it was kind of cornmeal-y. Even then, there was enough like just flour in there that it was. I mean, out of my barrel and a half, I think I pulled like 34 gallons off of that thing. It was terrible, but it was really, really fantastic. I did a really, really hot mash to try and break as much of that starch down as possible. I think I mashed like 162, something like that. Wasn't perfect, but I we have a Sabco, one of the barrel and a half systems. So I was able, I ran the burner on that system pretty actively through that to really try to break down all the starches in the Coruscant. But Coruscant is this really cool grain, has this really nice, herbal flavor to it, but it's really rich. It's got this really, really awesome sweetness and everything like that. So it made up probably, I mean, God, I think I only put 50 pounds total grain in that, and it was 20 pounds of it was Coruscant. So it was a good portion.
Yeah, that's a high adjunct
profile. It was really nice. It was really, really like soft but creamy and kind of like stuck to your cheeks. It was really good. It was overall really nice.
That's not one that I've brewed with, and so that's going to be a fun one for me to try out.
Yeah, it was. It was the first time that I've done a raw grain actively.
I've done a lot of raw regular wheats, and so but the Coruscant just adding that little extra flavor from, being not modified to the point where it's trying to be a neutral brewing grain. It's huge. Wade C. Floyd, thank you so much for giving us a super chat. You say, thanks for keeping me entertained and educated while I mash on Sunday mornings. That's what we're here for. And also, if you've got any questions towards the end of it and you're like, I don't know what's happening in my mash, or I want to throw a raw puppy dog into my mash, is that a good idea? I'd probably say no. Puppy dogs are nice.
Yeah.
So we've talked about Coruscant. Let's go into the last two are two that I've actually used quite a bit, and let's go Spelt first because that's the one that probably people don't see as often, but it's still pretty familiar in the brewing world.
Yeah. So Spelt, and actually our malt house in town just got a new Spelt. I'm gonna brew with I think this week, maybe the next week.
Yeah.
That I'm like super jazzed on. It's super expensive, but it's organic and it's hullless, which is great. Before this, the only Spelt that they have is a variety called Frank, which actually holds its hull. And I don't know if you've seen like what a Spelt grain is with hull on it. Go Google it right now for those of you that are watching. It's the craziest husk around. It's gigantic.
Could substitute for rice hulls, probably.
100%. Yeah. So, and actually, we've used it in that way a little bit because it still has extract in it. Like, you can still get sugars off of it, which is really cool. And as a result, you can actually do like 100% wheat-based things. Spelt is this like real pre-wheat grain. It's like it essentially looks like a gigantic wheat. It's really
back in the dinosaur ages.
Yep, but
dinosaur wheat.
Spelt is making this like cool resurgence in brewing right now, like as a high protein wheat based adjunct that people can add into hazies because it's got really great haze stability and the flavor is phenomenal. It's really, this sounds stupid, but wheaty. It's a wheat, but it's really wheaty and creamy and soft and overall this really nice deal. So Frank is a hull on wheat that is really interesting to use because in a standard sized bag of malt that you would get that's, in America it's 50-pound bag, and in Europe it's how many kilos, but it's 55 pounds.
25 kilos.
Yeah, so, it's that size. You can only get 30 pounds of it into one of those bags because it's so
fluffy.
It's so fluffy that you can only get 30 pounds, which is cool, but it's got a really fantastic flavor. So actually, back almost 2 years now, we, with Thomas at Bellwether, we did a 100% Spelt beer with it.
I missed that one.
And it was 10, I think that, brewed on the 10-barrel system and filled that mash tun up as much as we could. And it was still only I think that we only got 5 barrels off of that thing because it was so like it's so fluffy. It takes up so much space. But it ended up being really, really fantastic. So it's 100% Spelt, really nice. The newer Spelt that they have is Elwha River, which is a river in Washington. It's recently developed Spelt by WSU.
Oh yeah,
grown organically. Super excited to use it. I'm going to do a single hop pale with Idaho Gem. Next week or the week after with that, and they have a new malted oats, Monica oats, which should be really cool.
That's not also from WSU, or that?
Good question. I honestly don't know.
WSU does a lot of like malt breeding programs too, which my alma mater. I probably should have done something in the agricultural world when I was down there. I did biochemistry like a sissy.
Hey, you should have Kevin Murphy, their barley brewer or their barley breeder up here, and I bet he'd love. Like he's got some
that'd be awesome.
Crazy knowledge. He's a cool dude.
Those are my favorite people to talk to. I love just anytime anyone's got like focused knowledge on something that I can nerd out on. That's always the most fun.
Oh yeah,
that's the best.
Yeah, so Spelt's really cool, and it's making this like really cool growth in brewing because it's a great use in hazies and things like that. It's got really nice solid like haze potential and stability. It's really creamy, which and soft, which people want, and is overall just really nice. I think it's the sexier version of wheat to use. So I'm super jazzed to use it.
So any other brewing YouTubers that are out there, my challenge to you is make a Spelt hazy and put a video out on it.
Yeah,
that sounds super fun.
Yeah, Ruse.
Hey, the apartment brewer's still on. Apartment brewer. I don't know your actual first name, but make a Spelt hazy.
Yeah, do it.
Thoughts on pitching? Since I called you out, I'm going to read your question. Thoughts on pitching the entire 2-liter yeast starter wort and all into a 5-gallon batch? I usually do it because I don't care to decant. Neither does Brewlosophy, and I haven't noticed a difference. I also I pitch my entire starter. You're using beer flavors that are in your starter. It's relatively small. And the majority of the flavor impact from the starter is going to be your yeast. And I don't like decanting because I don't like deactivating the yeast. I would prefer, I think the benefits from a healthy, active started yeast outweigh the extra liquid that I'm getting from chilling it and decanting it. So also, Frank Spelt, we're going to make a petition. Anytime you call Spelt, anytime you use the word Spelt, instead you got to call it Dinosaur Spelt.
There you go. It's giant. I think it's perfect.
Yeah,
dig
perfect.
it.
Nailed it.
God, what's next? Oh,
the apartment brewer. Thank you so much for the 100% crystal malt WIB fund. All right, we're doing it. It's gonna happen.
Nice. Can I talk about Sonora real quick?
Yes, let's do it.
Yeah. So the 4th Landrace grain that we have and that we use that I just figured out the recipe for that we're gonna can ultimately. Sonora white wheat is the original white wheat that was used for flour tortillas. Fun fact.
Interesting.
Came over in like the 1500s from Europe. Was grown in Central America through Mexico. Now is like fairly common in southeast or southwestern United States. Is grown for us on our farm in the Palouse. Yeah. Really cool. It's actually a really like mild grain. It's a wheat. Tastes real wheaty.
Yeah.
Really fantastic. The ultimate recipe that we're going to do is 100% Mandarin of Bavaria.
Okay. Get a little bit of that oranginess going on.
Yeah, and it's been an interesting, fits kind of the wheat thing.
Yeah.
It's been an interesting beer to brew. Mandarina it's an interesting hop. Where the first couple times I brewed it, I have found that anything hot side with that thing is not a flavor I enjoy.
Yeah.
Like cold whirlpool and dry hop, fantastic. Everything else is not the flavor that I love.
Has it been one of those ones where you get like a little bit of a weird herbalness, like not an herbalness that you like, but almost it tastes too bitter? Like not
100%. You just described it's it's astringently bitter.
Yeah. I've gotten the same thing.
Even
we're on the same page.
It's so weird because when it's used in portions of a whirlpool and things like that or dry hop, that orange flavor is just wonderful.
Right.
But it's as 100%, if you use it with anything other than just cold whirlpool and dry hopping, it's just it's like you're chewing on orange pith. And it's terrible.
I've gotten that same thing. Yeah, it's weird, but I don't know exactly how to correct it, but
yeah.
What's next?
One
more.
Rye and Trit.
Is there
beer.
Yeah.
Oh crap. So the pale is 100% Centennial or the IPA is 100% Strata. You pick.
Strata.
Strata it is. Strata's a fantastic hop if you haven't used it. It is developed by a small company in unison with, I think it's the University of Oregon, down in Oregon, called Indie Hops. That Strata is like quickly becoming my all-time favorite hop. It's got like the perfect balance between citrus, tropical, and like weed in the best ways possible. It's like, do you guys use Strata often?
We've used it twice now, and both times with good results, but we didn't make the best overall beer both times. We kind of had some things go with the brewing that it was still good. You can taste the hops, but we did it wrong.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, no, Strata, like if you haven't gotten a hold of Strata, it's expensive, but it is like so worth it. So this is a single origin Strata. That's a big thing for us. If you haven't noticed, like we want single origin everything, hops, malt, everything. So this Strata is grown by Roy Farms in Moxie, Washington, like the coolest dudes around in hop growing. They grow a lot of certified organic stuff for Yakima Chief. But they grow Strata, and it is the coolest hop. It is, to me, it's the perfect blend of dank, tropical, citrus, like all the way through.
I can smell it as soon as I'm pouring it.
I can smell it from here. Nuts. Yeah. So this is again going back to Bill Meyer's Joseph's Granary. This is 100% Baroness barley and Cashup white wheat. Mm-hmm. I guess I say 100%. It is acidulated. Yeah, so it's really nice and light. The flavor on it is fantastic. The smell is just like...
I could smell it as soon as I started pouring it.
It's like
all of a sudden... Poof.
Lemon lime with like a little bit of pot behind it. It's super, super... it's
I get citrus and like I get like a deeper orange, like almost like a... what are those small oranges that are a little like a cuties kind of orange?
Yeah. The Satsumas.
Those things, yeah. Like a little bit of the sweeter kind of orange flavor.
Yeah.
And maybe a little bit of peachiness too.
Yeah, totally. It's really, really nice. And it's got, to me, it's that, and the way that they describe it, Indie Hops, the company that developed it, is that it's that like dank kind of marijuana thing without the cabbiness.
Right.
Which without I 100% agree with.
Without the pungence,
Yeah, it's super nice, super clean, super smooth. So this is just, and actually...
This is super approachable. This is probably like, if I had a beer that I was like, someone was like, I don't like IPAs, and I'm trying to get them into IPAs, this would probably be the beer that I'd be like, you got to try this IPA.
So this is funny too, because I enjoy hazies for sure, and I brew them, we brew them a little bit.
Yeah.
But I like a little bit of like a crisp bitterness behind it. So I've been describing this to people as like it's that blend between East and West Coast, like where a traditional like New England IPA has just like maybe cold side and dry hopped. This actually is like 50 IBUs. This has like a fair amount of Columbus for bittering.
Okay.
And I did some 5-minute addition of Strata, and then it was cold side Whirlpool and dry hop. But it is like, it's like 48 IBUs, but it doesn't feel super bitter. It's really nice.
It's really soft. And it's got a lot of big flavors. It definitely still tastes like an IPA. You can feel it's an IPA, but it's not aggressive.
Totally.
All right, let's quickly go over rye and Trit. We have some time for some Q&As.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so we use a lot of rye and triticale. We have a good farmer friend named James Wall that he grows rye and triticale. He's like, rye is the like worst grain for farmers to grow because it's literally a weed. It invades other fields and things like that. But we love rye in hazies and other things. Rye has this like beautiful, beautiful spicy flavor. So if you haven't used a lot of rye in brewing, please do. And please use it at really high portions. Like a lot of people with rye beers, they'll do small. Like they'll do like 5% of a grain bill.
Or even 10% and be like, it's a rye pale. Is it?
No.
Yeah.
50%. Do 50%. It's fantastic. Use a lot, like if you want to do something hoppy, I recommend some Chinook in there for flavor. That spiced grapefruit pepper thing from Chinook with rye is just phenomenal. Really recommended. Triticale is another one that he grows, which is like this rye wheat hybrid grain that is has less of that spiciness, more herbal. Do you guys use Trit?
Yeah.
His Trit a lot? It's
quite a bit. I'll almost always use it instead of rye in a lot of my beers that are
totally
designed to have some rye-y flavor, but I'm going for that little extra.
Yeah, I actually like the Trit better. It's got a cleaner flavor to me. Rye can be rye can be overpowering in really high portions. Trit is really herbal and floral and really beautiful.
If you use if I'm using rye, I usually use a combination of flaked and malted, but I'm usually trying to get that pumpernickel kind of feel.
Totally.
If I'm using triticale, I kind of want something a little extra, and I want obviously the proteins and head building qualities from it.
Absolutely.
But I'm kind of wanting it to take a back seat.
Absolutely. Yeah. Cool. I mean, rye and triticale, fantastic. I highly recommend if you can get them from Link, get them from Link. The rye that James grows is called Gazelle rye. He's tried some other ones. Gazelle's been the best one that we've found. It's really, really nice. The triticale as well is just fantastic. It's like, think about a really herbal floral wheat. Again, a giant grain, huskless, really, really worth getting your hands on and brewing with. And I mean, even in hazies, like I brought another beer for Peter today that was a lot of trit. It was the new Genie pale malt that they have, that Link has, and then like it was probably 30% trit and like 10% wheat.
I'm excited for that.
Really, really good.
Sounds really good.
With Idaho 7 and Azaka. So
anytime you get a chance to experience like these high flavor grains in beer, I think it's just an experience that a lot of people aren't used to. Sometimes grains, I think Homebrew for Life actually just did a video about how grains are taking a back seat today to all the new yeasts and hops that are coming out.
Yeah.
And grains are kind of taking that back seat. So I like being able to showcase, like, by the way, there's a lot of really good flavor building that you can do with fun, unique grains.
And that's what we've found is like, we've started branching into more hoppy things, but it's truly, I don't want to say it's in subservience to the malt, but the malt to me has to be present. It has to be a portion of what we do, and it has to be flavorful. And I found Trit to be a really, really beautiful way to bring malt flavor into like a really, really strongly hopped IPA.
Yeah,
because
I like that.
It has that like beautiful floral punch. Actually, we did the 2019 ALS. Did you guys do an ALS?
No, we didn't.
The 2019 blend to me was like fairly herbal floral.
Yeah.
And we did a pretty significant portion of triticale in that beer, and it played so perfectly with that herbal floral hop blend.
I can see that going well.
It was really, really nice. So I'm like very quickly falling in love with using Trit in hoppy beers.
I like it. Everyone out there, comment what your favorite malt that you heard of on the stream today is, that you're excited to use in the upcoming future if you can. The ALS blend, the only ones that I had from those were from, you can take this one, I got it on my phone.
Cool.
But I've had it because Golden Handle did the ALS thing every year, so I was able to try theirs.
No, it's been cool. They're doing 2 blends this year, which is really neat. They're doing like it looks like, at least reading the thing, it's going to be a fairly citrus forward one with Citra like 30% of the one of the blends, and then another one fairly similar to the last one that I think will be a little bit more floral with like Simcoe Laurel as the proprietary or the big punches on them. So it'll be cool.
That'd probably be my favorite one to use. All right, let's find some questions on here and start answering. A lot of these are kind of response. So when we're pulling a hazy IPA, I've generally gotten down to around 150 and then cooled down quickly from there. Anybody have a target temp to shoot for when they start cooling quickly? My go-to on that is I have 2 different ranges that I'll shoot for if I'm doing a hazy with big Whirlpool editions. Sometimes I'll just throw a big Whirlpool edition right under 200 and then just kind of let it free chill down to like 180 to 170. But if I'm doing 2 stages, I'll have one between 140 and 160 and one between 180 and 200. You kind of get on the lower end, you get a really sharp citrus bite, and on the upper end, you get a lot of those tropical fruit notes. But if you go too hot, if you go like that boiling temperature, a lot of those tropical notes kind of fade off. So that's what I do.
Yep. Yeah, I'll do occasionally like a 185 and then down to like 160. I like the 185. Gets a little bit of bitterness to it, but you're like you said, a nice like tropical nose and things like that.
Yep.
And then that lower one is get a lot more of that just general aroma flavor. I like that.
Yep. Let's see what else we got. Already answered that one. When you start chilling down quickly, to kind of finish out that when I start chilling down quickly is going to be around that 150, 160 or below. 140 is definitely the lowest. A lot of bacteria can start growing below 140, so I don't like to let it sit in that temperature range too long.
Yeah, I get nervous below even 160 for me, where I'm like, I mean, when you're larger scale, it's just expensive, and I don't want to lose anything like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, especially when you're doing a big batch. People got me in the comments. A lot of these are about the same question. I'm going from the top down, so. Just did a Mandarina Bavaria and our Hoppy Lager / IPL Pilsner NEPA and our Pale Ale. Effing love this. Hop. Is it proprietary? Mandarina Bavaria is that a Haas product or is that?
It's German. I can't remember. It's a Hallertau variety.
Yeah.
I can't remember who bred it. I don't even think it was Hopsteiner. I don't think you can get rhizomes, but it's pretty easy and it's dirt cheap. Like you can get Mandarina. I mean, if you watch, go to Hops Direct. You can. I mean, I think I bought 44 pounds of Mandarina recently for like $5 a pound. It was several years old, but it still tastes fantastic. So you can get Mandarina pretty easily all the way through. Yeah, it's a cool one. It's a Hallertau variety.
What's your go-to for increasing bicarbonate? Generally chalk, just because calcium and bicarbonate tend to go well together. They can help the beer flocculate out at the end of it. Sometimes I'll use baking soda if I can use a little extra sodium in my beer. But sodium can also get overwhelming pretty fast, and usually I'm going for sodium maybe between 10 and 20 parts per million, whereas bicarbonates I can go all the way up to 100 to 200 parts per million. So I generally use bicarbonates from chalk. Thoughts on dry hopping, adding hops into fermenter with 170-degree wort 30 minutes before adding chilled wort to the fermenter. Wait, what? Oh, dip hopping?
Oh, yeah, I saw that dip hopping.
Adding hops into fermenter with 170-degree wort before adding chilled wort to the fermenter.
Honestly,
30 minutes before. That's not...
This kind of sounds like whirlpooling to me.
Yeah, it should have the same effect. Movement. The only thing that I would say is there might be some risk of oxidation. Not that that's going to be a huge deal. No, because it's pre-fermentation still. So, yeah.
I don't, 170 degrees, you're pretty good on sanitation.
I feel like it's probably an okay idea if you have... But I mean, it's useless unless you have the right system, or you have a system that can't do a proper hop stand.
Yeah.
So it would be system dependent.
Yeah, and I actually think that, and I may be wrong, but I actually think that the Alchemist in Vermont does that. I've seen them like stirring hops in their fermenters at like 170 degrees because I kind of assume that they don't have a whirlpool that they can use. So I kind of think that they use that as an alternative. And I actually read something recently on, I don't know, craft beer and brewing or something like that, where they were talking about hop dipping as a new thing. I don't know enough about it to be able to speak.
The apartment brewer just paid $5 to make sure that all of you guys know to hit the like button, and I support that message. Thank you so much, the apartment brewer. Everyone hit the like button so this video can get millions of views.
Somebody just asked, ever used amaranth? I have not. Ghostfish is a brewery over in Seattle that they are a gluten-free brewery. One of their brewers is celiac, and the other one's wife is celiac, I believe. So they 100% gluten-free, and I know that they do use amaranth. So they may be a resource to reach out to and talk to. I know that they struggle to get gluten-free grains malted. It's a big nightmare. There's a craft malt house in Colorado somewhere, I can't remember the name of them, that they do gluten-free malting. That, again, I assume if you Google like craft gluten-free malt, they'll pop up.
There's probably,
yeah.
There's some strains of Spelt can be gluten-free too, can't they? Isn't there a certain strain of Spelt that's gluten-free?
That's a good question. I don't know. Honestly, I know that with our bread, we sell Spelt not as gluten-free, but as digestible, friendly for gluten-intolerant people. Yeah. Because it's just a much more digestible gluten strain. So
I don't know where I heard that from, but
there might be a gluten-free Spelt.
I thought that was a thing, but I'm not 100% sure. The apartment brewer asked if with high-protein malts on electric systems, he gets a higher risk of scorching.
Oh, that's a good question. Yeah, so we're on an electric system, but I'm sure that that's a problem. Like, I mean, there's so much protein that falls out. Yeah. I mean, we end up with like in our 10-barrel batches, we end up with like a 8 to 12 inch deep pile of protein at the bottom of our tank. I can imagine that any burners would cause a problem. I think that step mashing would probably help with that.
It would reduce the proteins. So step mashing can probably help. My other thing would be if you're doing If you're doing some sort of a mash ramp at the end, doing a rims style system could help as well.
Yeah, strain some of that out.
Basically just diffusing the heat in any possible way you can. If you're using something like the Anvil Foundry, making sure that the bottom of the Anvil Foundry is clean and you're not using like hard abrasives on that, because that can create scratches, and the scratches are a good spot for sugars and proteins to glom into, and that can make them burn if they're on a burner. Other than that, probably just if you're heating up in those during the mash, just a looser mash, higher water to grist ratio. Have we ever done a grisette? I've done plenty of grisettes. Basically, grisette is a higher protein, lower ABV farmhouse beer, and they are super tasty. Sir Blah says pros and cons between using a hop spider and just dropping in freely. I recommend dropping in freely over using a hop spider specifically. You can lose a lot of hop efficiency that way.
Yeah, I know that I don't like using any sort of containment for hops. Like
maximize that contact.
I would rather take the loss on the overall volume than reduce my
flavor.
Contact.
Yeah,
like I'm not brewing because I want it to be efficient. I'm brewing because I want it to be tasty.
Best possible beer. That's what you're going for.
Yep.
I have a blue purple flakes malt in the past, but I can't remember what it's called. Sound familiar to you guys? Blue/purple flakes malt. Honestly, that can be flaked rye sometimes.
Yeah.
If it was a commonly found malt, it's probably flaked rye.
Could have been a flaked corn, like a flaked blue corn or something like that too.
Yeah, depending on the fracture, how it looks.
I don't know. I don't know anybody that commercially would produce that.
Yeah. On the big scale. Free range hopping. I think we're good. Shannon Tejon says, really knowledgeable guest today, Peter. Glad to continue learning from Genus. Nailed it. I can read. It's been really fun. How do you get your chalk to dissolve in water? High temperature, and generally speaking, it's going to dissolve better with neutral water than it's going to in a pre-acidified water. So if you are, for whatever reason, pre-acidify your water for strike, don't, because it will it'll make the chalk slake out, basically.
Yeah, we just recently started. The only water adjustment, we don't do any water adjustments. The only chemistry adjustments that we've ever done, and we just recently started doing it, is just acidulated malt.
Yeah.
Because water, Spokane water is just like super, super basic as it is.
Yeah.
I mean, we've had certain portions of the year where we'll pull water samples and get them tested, and it's like 8.
Yeah.
And so, we need to adjust something. And then, base malt is just not super acidic anyways, so we just do acidulated.
Yeah, we're at our old location. We were at 8 pH 2, but here we're actually at 7.
Nice.
I don't know why.
So you're pretty good to go.
Yeah, our water comes into this building super neutral. We got it tested,
nice.
And it's like low minerality across the board.
Awesome.
So
yeah,
it's crazy. But at the shop we were at before, we got that one tested, and it was 8 pH, high bicarbonates or high-ish.
That's what we're at. It's like it's wild. So yeah, we have to add acidulated.
But we've got really good water in Spokane. It's nice because we've got the aquifer.
So. And actually, the reason that we've never done anything was because we kind of like what we do with all of our grain. We just want it to taste like what Spokane is, right? So we just want to use. I mean, we have fantastic aquifer water, but I've started acidulating because we just get a little bit of a better extract and things like that.
Exactly.
Better mash. So,
Delonius Monk, is there no concern for hot cideration with dip hopping? That was my one thing that I thought might be an issue, but again, it's really hard to get hot cideration. So I probably wouldn't worry about it. For me, I'd probably just do a guess and check. I know I can brew more often than most people, but on the homebrew scale, I'd probably just try it and see if I got any off flavors from hot cideration. My guess is that I wouldn't. I'm not going to say there's no concern, because it does seem, especially depending on how you're pouring the cold wort on top of the hot beer. But my guess is that there's no concern. Would you use spelt and wheat malt in conjunction? If so, what ratio? Just tuning in. Sorry if you went over this. Yeah, you can. You usually go for them for slightly different reasons. But you can if you're going for, like, let's say 100% wheat beer. If you use that Frank Spelt and you want that Frank Spelt for the fluffiness.
That'd be fantastic.
But
but like for me personally, in like a hazy or something like that, I would, if you're going to use spelt, I'd just use spelt.
Yeah.
Like do something that's a little bit more directed. If you want to taste what that spelt tastes like, use the spelt or use the wheat. Either way.
Yeast and the Beast. I'm late. Doing yard work. Yard work is less important than the live stream.
His wife doesn't agree.
The apartment brewer uses baking soda for his. Yeah, we use baking soda for, going back to the bicarbonate. How do you add that? Baking soda is the one thing about that is I try to make sure that I'm calculating out my sodium. Which, honestly, sodium and chloride, I add a little bit more if I'm doing anything German style. So there's not a lot of German style things that I want when I'm adding bicarbonate, though. So it's one of those conundrums. That's why I end up usually adding, because usually when you use a high bicarbonate, you're going for like a Burton-on-Trent profile, which is high calcium and bicarbonate.
Flinty and,
Yeah. Thoughts on beers 4 out of 5 days. Lots of hop flavor. Let's see. Am I almost caught up? I think I'm almost caught up. Perfect. Rasmus Elgard. I need to go out and get dinner, so I'm out. Take care, all. And great show, Peter, at Genus Brewing. See some of you guys on Wednesday. Later. Nice. Yes, you will. That's the Browscast. The Hoppy Hour. I think we're all caught up. Do you see any other questions?
No, I don't think so.
Cool.
Holler if you've got them, but yeah, I think that we hit them.
And if you haven't already followed The Grain Shed on social medias, The Grain Shed is an awesome local brewery / bakery, which is a really cool combination. Again, going back to their shtick, they do an awesome job at bringing local grains and really unique grains into both their beer and their bread that they make. And so it's a really good way to learn about unique things that you've probably never heard of, and also taste things that you probably can't taste in beer elsewhere. So
yeah, if you're ever in Spokane, come visit us. We would love to talk. And I mean, I'm the beer side. Our baker is like the craziest knowledgeable person on. It's really, really fascinating. Yeah, swing on by. Oh, we've got 2 new questions. What's y'all's favorite lager yeast?
3470 is my favorite lager yeast.
I have no idea what that means, but I really love Harvest. I
Harvest
also
is
recently
different, yeah.
brewed with Global and enjoyed that too.
Global is 3470.
I like that
So
one.
that's the Fine Stefan lager strain.
Yeah.
So yeah, Global 3470. That's kind of my go-to just because of its universality.
Yeah.
Harvest is nice because it's got a subtle fruitiness that kind of pushes forward some maltiness too. But yeah, 3470 just because it's just more plug and play to me.
Yeah.
But I do love Harvest as well.
No, and that's what I found from Global is that it was very like you could do damn near anything.
Yeah.
And it'd be delicious.
Make a West Coast IPA with Global and it'll still work out.
Why not?
What else? Was there another question that was out there? I don't think it was what to do after I extract all my bicarbonate? So are you talking about if you slake out all your bicarbonate? So if you get all your bicarb down, you don't need it for most beers. There's only certain beers that you really want bicarbonate in. There's a certain minerality that you get from bicarbonate being in your beer, and it's probably most commonly needed in something like a dry Irish stout. But outside of that, there's really not a lot that you need it for. Any Burton style ones. Someone says Urkel as a lager yeast. Urkel is great, but Urkel is more difficult to use. It can throw sulfurs, and it also throws diacetyl if you don't do a VDK rest. But yeah.
So here's my question. You said you could do a West Coast IPA with Global.
Yeah.
So have you done like the cold IPA thing that Wayfinder's pumping out of Portland?
We've made something that's the exact same thing before. Yeah. And so when they're like cold IPA, I'm like, well, we call it an IPL, but whatever.
Yeah, right.
But the biggest thing was like, so IPL is more like, generally like West Coasty, generally like, a little bit brighter. Yeah. Whereas they are trying to do a hazy flavor profile into an IPL.
Right. But they're fermenting at like 64.
Yeah, 64, 65. And they're using the 3470 strain, the global strain. And so I don't get why they're calling it a cold IPA.
Because they want to do something different, right?
Yeah, I get that they're calling it a cold IPA because it's got IPA in the name and it's like new and topical. But it's,
and he doesn't like IPLs. He's like, I don't want it. IPLs are stupid.
It's IPA with a lager yeast. That's what it is.
Yeah.
But I mean, I get that it's more marketable to do an IPA with some sort of caveat in front of it than it is to do an IPL.
Totally.
But I can agree with some of the flavors that you might get off of it. I don't agree that it's a different beer. I think he's just making a hazy with a hazy with a lager yeast that ends up being cleared. So a juicy IPA. It's a juicy IPA. Yeah. I'm sure there's thousands of people who have made a juicy IPA like that before.
For sure.
Any other? Ever used pickling lime? I usually don't need to because I get all my minerals from everything else. And I believe we are.
I think that's it.
Caught up. Alka-Seltzer tablets. No. Everyone, follow The Grain Shed on all social medias. What's your favorite social media to plug?
Oh, I mean, Instagram and Facebook for Instagram. Do Instagram.
He takes some great pictures for their Instagram, so do that.
I like the photos thing. It's fun, man.
Tell them to like our second channel.
Oh, yeah. Make sure to like and subscribe to this channel. These guys are fantastic. Also, if you're ever in Spokane and you don't already live there, obviously, come on down. These dudes do the coolest stuff. I mean, fantastic homebrew shop anyways. But, yeah, come use Tums for bicarb. Peter, what's your take on somebody using Tums for bicarb?
It's going to have a little bit of a weird flavor, but it literally is the same thing as chalk.
There you go. Use the raspberry one and do it in like a fruited sour. It'd be great. It'd be fantastic. Yeah.
Something about sorry that we're purple.
Oh yeah, sorry that we're purple. The battery died on the camera midway through. If you weren't here for that portion, it was really exciting. I thought that we were going to die, but no, we're still here. You could hear us talking, so that was fun. Our Instagram is @thegrainshed. Same with Facebook, I believe.
I'm about to link it.
Yeah. Oh, Peter's about to link it, so check it there. Yeah, make sure to like and subscribe to this channel also. Yeah, if you're ever in town, come by, see both of us. It's some pretty cool stuff. Actually, Spokane doesn't get a whole lot of talk. Spokane has some absolutely fantastic, unique beer that is really worth checking out. Like if you want something a little bit different, like there's 90,000 places that do hazy IPAs, which is fine. But like if you want something different, come to Spokane. It's pretty cool. It's pretty cool stuff.
Any stream in 3, 2, 1.
Bye, guys.